Mike Randinetti, who's our event chair for the evening, and he will introduce our first speaker from EMC. That's what you're going to do, Mike?
That's about what I'll do, yes.
All right, come on.
But we'll make a couple of quick opening remarks first.
Yeah.
So welcome, everybody. Really good to see a lot of old friends and new faces as well. The great Renaissance philosopher Nikolai Machiavelli wrote that there's nothing more difficult to take in hand, more perilous to conduct, or more uncertain in its success than to take lead in introducing a number of things. Because the innovator has for its enemies all of those who have done well under the old conditions, and lukewarm defenders in those who may do well under the new law. More recently, an American political icon, Robert F. Kennedy, in a much more direct way said, progress is a nice word, but change is its motivator, and change has its enemies. Innovation is tough. We've got innovation highway roadkill, RIM, Nokia, the list goes on and on. One of the few rebirth stories happens to be our good friends from IBM that were an incredibly relevant organization for a long period of time, but lost their way. And have recreated themselves to be stronger and more influential than they've ever been. And we're going to be hearing from Deborah Maggi in a few minutes about what they've done from an innovation process point of view to regain their global lead in innovation. Another interesting example of a company that's lost its way is Procter & Gamble, right? P&G was the epitome of open innovation success, right? The whole Connect and Develop program, where they set a goal to bring in more than 50% of their innovation revenue from outside the company, and they were incredibly successful. I don't know who saw the Wall Street Journal today, but there was a very interesting article, an open 13-page letter to P&G CEO by a hedge fund questioning the leadership of that CEO in very, very strong language. Right? CEO had, P&G has lost its way, and they're not under incredible stress. We're going to hear from our good friend Mike Turillo, the executive chairman of Inno360, a company that was spun out of P&G. And Mike will talk about what P&G is doing to get themselves back on track to continue to provide the leadership that we've come to know about them across so many different product categories. What we're going to think about today is, in fact, how do we have sustainable innovation, right? Best practices in innovation are evolving constantly. We started off with the lone inventor, with Gutenberg in the press, and Whitney in the cotton gin, and Edison in the light bulb. And we evolved into a second phase of innovation. That phase was all about the corporate lab. And we saw DuPont with their miracle molecules, and our good friends from IBM with Watson Labs, and what they did, winning 5 Nobel Prizes in 17 consecutive years, issuing more patents than any other company on the planet. Okay? And then in the 70s and 80s, we moved into a new era, which is the era of the startup. And we all know the startup, we're in the center of the activity on the East Coast here in Kendall Square. And we have a lot of pride in all the great companies that have been born here in Boston and Silicon Valley. But I really do believe we are moving into a fourth and very interesting era, and that is the era of the corporate catalyst. Okay? And there's a remarkable amount of reverse innovation that we are seeing from leaders like General Electric and Unilever and Caterpillar and Harman and many others that we'll talk about on the panel today. And to me, what we're seeing is a realization that the growth in the G7 or the G20 economies is no longer there. Companies are looking for profit and growth elsewhere. Emerging economies are where it's at. We're seeing a lot of very interesting innovation happening in emerging businesses and being brought back into the United States. So I want to hear from today, we will hear from some of the great corporate catalysts in our country. We're going to start off by bringing up Sanjay Mirchandani, but I just want to thank my students from Hult. We are live streaming this event to the Hult International School of Business in San Francisco and Boston. And it will be also streamed to the other campuses in Dubai and London as well, and Shanghai. So thank you, David Norman and Mohammed Faraz and the teams. So it is my honor to bring up Sanjay Mirchandani, who is the president of the IT group of EMC. Sanjay did not come up through the traditional IT rank. He is a general manager and a business leader. He applies business and innovation thinking to the way that he creates delivery services across the entire EMC footprint around the world. I've heard him speak at TiE events many times. You're in for a treat. Sanjay.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Well, good evening. I apologize to some of you who heard me second time this weekend because there was another event I was at, a different kind of event. So I apologize. Different content. So hopefully we'll keep it exciting. It's great to be here. And Anita, next time you want me to look like an Indian politician, I want a few more of these things. Sure. No, we don't want to do updates right now. Assuming we don't want to do updates right now. Okay. Yeah. Okay, little context. The focus on innovation that I'm going to take on behalf of EMC today is really around a nucleus we created about 6 years ago called the Center of Excellence. Center of Excellence, really, we think about it as, today it's mainstream for us, but back then it was a microcosm, if you would, of EMC in certain countries where we wanted to go for a multitude of reasons, not just for the reasons which, most importantly though, we wanted the talent. We wanted to go to where the talent was because, clearly nobody has a monopoly on talent. So we wanted to go where there was innovation, there were ideas, there was talent, there was energy, there were young graduates, really the things of what we were looking for. And we call that entity, the physical entity, the Center of Excellence, which kind of turned into a virtual entity in some countries. For example, in Israel, we have 2 physical locations, one in Tel Aviv and the other in Beersheba. And we collectively call that a Center of Excellence, but it's really the capabilities more than physical presence. Maybe you would speak a little bit louder. Okay, then maybe. Okay, I'll speak up.
Use the mic.
Okay, so I'm gonna try. Hey, Wissam, can I request you to help me with these slides? Because we're in PDF mode. Thank you. Wissam's a distinguished engineer, but I'm going to request him to help me with this.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, apparently, you can't do a presentation today without an apple of some kind on it. An Irish playwright said that if I have an apple and you have an apple, we give each other an apple, we still each have one apple. But if I have an idea and you have an idea and we exchange ideas, we now each have 2 ideas. So that being the premise of how we think about innovation, it's really about being able to share. And the basis on which we built these centers of excellence is that folks around the world, whether they be in the US, on the West Coast, and the East Coast, in China, in India, share. And through the sharing, it comes about the birth of ideas. And the idea is, it's not about how, whether they're patented or not, that would be one litmus test. But can we really do something with it? And as a company that has to report out to shareholders on a regular basis, ideas have to be real. For us, when we look at, in our industry, when we look at the waves of change, it's all about innovation that's driven these waves of change. And Boston's, we're a Boston-based company. We've been the hub of headquarter company, I should say, we're a global company. But the technology innovations have been at the cusp of these changes, and every one of these, the time frame between one phase of that journey, one stage to the other, gets more and more compressed. And I think that's because you can take any perspective you want on it, but the world is a smaller place, and things move faster, and innovation comes through quicker, and people like to work together and like to collaborate, and so on. So I think a big proponent in this wave of change in our industry has been the fact that people work on a global basis better together, and the tools allow that to happen. I'm not going to talk about big data, but I will talk about cloud. And as a company that we believe that what we're trying to do every single day is help our customers and our partners on their journey to the tip of this technology wave and the technology crest. And the fundamental premise of that is ubiquitous computing, cloud computing. So that's sort of what we're working on. That's more of a backdrop of what EMC is trying to do. And when I tell a little bit more about our journey in innovation. So if you think about the global ecosystem today, and this is a simplistic chart, but when you look at global customer requirements, a customer for us in China, or a customer for us in Ireland, or a customer for us in the United States, as much as we think of the needs on whether it be storage or security or other things will be largely the same. There are differences that we need in each of those markets. You know, as we enter new markets. Talent. This is a talent game. We're in Boston because of talent. We're in California because of talent. We're in other parts of the world because of talent. That is what we need to keep the innovation cycles and the ideas flowing. New routes to market. Our ecosystem includes a very elaborate supply chain. You've got to get products from one place, build them in another place, deliver them in the third place, deliver them in the fourth place, use them in the fifth place. Right? We all live in that world today, and it's real time. And then alliances. Nobody can do alone. In our business, all about partnerships and deep partnerships. And these partners are creating new business models in different parts of the world. We got to find ways to bring these things together. So this is the ecosystem, if you would, that drives what we're trying to do. The products we create, the services we deliver. So why did we build centers of excellence? What was at the heart of that? Three big things. As a company, we were growing internationally. That was a stated direction we were taking. We had markets that we wanted to be in. We had products that we thought had good fit. Customers were asking from us. So we were growing internationally. We were investing. We were creating new partnership models, and that was the direction we were taking as a company. We said, well, but in these markets and selectively in some of these markets, we want to look at what the innovation is and what the talent is. Now, we've been in Ireland, for example, it's one of our centers of excellence, since the mid-80s. And I'll share an example of an innovation that came out of there for us recently through this process. So we've been trying to do this for a long time, and the goal is innovate everywhere. And we encourage sharing and we encourage partnering. If you have an idea and you're in Ireland, and I'm somebody you could from a different division, different group in Hopkins, Massachusetts. We encourage you to work together. We look at innovation that comes from team effort as opposed to just solo effort. Steve will talk more about that. Steve's up next in the next session. And being locally relevant in the markets that we operate in. It's not about parachuting in and saying, what innovation do you have for us? It's about being relevant in the market, working with academia, working with relevant agencies, and making sure we have sustainable models for innovation as we work in these markets. So this chart hasn't been touched in the better part of 6 years. This is exactly the way we defined it 6 years ago. Tom sitting over here on my right, and I were sort of instrumental 6 years ago in coming up with this. Must have spent months trying to come up with the right bullets in this chart. Because this became the rallying cry for how we wanted to do things in this new space. And we knew very well that going into the markets up front, we wanted to hit all of them day one, but we had to evolve into being that full functional capability over time. And innovation was one of the big litmus tests that we had. So where do we have these? Israel, India, we have 3 locations in China, Egypt, Russia, North Carolina, where we've got cloud computing innovation capability, and Ireland, which is our first. And they complement each other. So obviously, in some cases, there's overlap in what they do, but in other cases, they complement each other. And the goal is to work better together. And of course, there's all the other locations. And I'll try and give you a little more color on what kind of locations we have as part of this mix. These are centers of excellence. And then we have about 50,000 people working across the world. We have different types of presence. So I shared with you the centers of excellence. We have R&D centers, but these are just based on a product or product type or skill set. We have R&D centers. We have direct presence, sales, marketing presence, customer support centers, briefing centers, manufacturing centers, and solution centers. And sometimes we have more than one entity within one physical presence for one location. And again, the goal is work together. Doesn't matter what you do every day, by way of customer facing or internal. The goal is, can you leverage these resources across the world? So one of the things we do have is a very robust social platform internally. We call it, the tagline for it is EMC1. And it's not anonymous, so you log in with your ID. You're known on the system. There are lots of EMC folks here. They'll tell you that they use it every day for different things, whether they're in engineering, product support, sales, marketing, IT, doesn't matter. They can spin up a forum, they share things, they create it, they can blow it away, keep it, and be persistent. People can join in. And when you go online and you look at some of these forums, and you look at some of these conversations, they're rich because they're global. Folks all over the world, different time zones, operating as one. We got some video features and capabilities in that, and so we're trying to do a lot with making this sort of the currency with which people operate. The goal was, when we started up the Centers of Excellence, we incubated. They were like a business that we wanted to incubate and give them life and give them sort of the DNA from the corporate office, the corporate EMC DNA. But we also wanted to make sure that they were locally relevant and they were bringing the local flavor in. So we didn't want silos. We wanted to infuse the DNA. We wanted to drive financial excellence, be accountable. It's not about writing a check. It's about what you're giving back. Also, what you're giving back. Engaged in a power world-class talent, and we pride ourselves as a company of execution. You're going to do what you say you're going to do. Can you measure it? Right? Can you course correct? So we built this, and we said, as they got more mature, as the centers got more mature, we said, okay, how are you innovating? What are you doing? Now I'm going to cheat and tell you that it's written a book on this, on these centers, on the innovation mechanics in these centers. So I'm stealing a few pages out of this book, but I'm also giving you first-hand experience because this is it's alive with the energy of being able to make a difference. That's how they keep going. So how do we I gave you sort of the softer feel about how we came about with these things. How do we actually put some structure or some discipline or some rigor behind making it happen? So we have something. There's three pieces to this. From the people side, we have an innovation network. Anyone in the company can get on and contribute. They can partner. They can be mentored. They can be part of a bigger project. They can be on their own. There's a process. We feed that, that there is one way, there is one big annual event that we do, which is actually happening at the end of this month. And it's the Innovation Conference. It's global. And we have thousands of entries that go in. There's a system that captures it. And there's a whole process by which we look at the best ideas and we bring them to life. Now, not all, and there's a big weeding out process, but there is a formal innovation conference that is keynoted. We put a lot of time, effort, money behind it. And that's only one way for folks to feel like we're looking at the ideas and we're touching them, making sure that their efforts being reviewed. And then there's the process by which the best ideas are showcased. You can do it any time of the year. You don't have to do it just during the innovation conference. You can do it any time of the year, but that's when we really highlight them. And this is really chaperoned, this process, by our EMC fellows and distinguished engineers. This is a rarefied space within the company. And Steve just got appointed fellow today. It was announced today.
Congratulations, Steve.
Ratified. He's part of our
That's
team.
why I'm clicking here, right?
You're the best. Okay, that's sort of the formal umbrella under which we do it. I spoke too soon. Yeah. The innovation pipeline. Let me give you an example. 2012. This is what's happening. In a week. We have so far. This is a slide that Tom built real time. We have 2,200 ideas that have been submitted into this process. 28 countries have been represented. We have COEs only in 7 places. 28 countries have been represented in this mix. Many of them collaborating with each other. Many divisions, groups, individuals collaborating with each other. You can see sort of the mix of where they're coming from. All of them. It's a truly global sort of mix, and we've highlighted in red just for your benefit the Centers of Excellence because we have a concentration of folks who do this kind of work every day, and you see the contributions of them. It is absolutely exciting, and the process by which the winners are picked, showcased, awarded, and followed through with has matured in the last few years quite dramatically. This is run out of our CTO office, so it's run by our Chief Technology Officer. This is under his office. 3 of them, right here on the chart. 3 of them. So the first one was, this was in 2010, and it, technology company, but it was a packaging idea. In a way that, unique way in which we build sustainable packaging approaches and product that allowed us to truly, save millions of dollars annually, but also was much greener from its impact. And so, most when you buy a big storage, array, a lot of packaging. That packaging usually gets disposed of in good or bad ways. And we found ways, this team found ways to repackage that and make it truly sustainable. And it came out of our COE in Ireland, right? It came out of Ireland. The mine.
US was part of it.
This one was completely different. A degree in cloud computing. And so the team, this is our team in Cork, Ireland, that came up with this, and they worked with the local university to actually create a degree where you can get a master's, in a bachelor's and a master's in cloud computing. And if I remember right, the first year was sold out the moment it was filled out the moment it was announced. And again, completely different space, right, on education and furthering that. 2009, that became a product. This was around truly leveraging product technology that EMC had, VMware had, and our consumer company iOmega took advantage of, brought it together, and brought virtualization on the hard drives that they sell, the NAS devices that they sell, down to the average person, so that you can take advantage of things like virtualization. And it was productized something called vFlow. So three ideas, three examples of cross-group, completely different, very, completely varied, that came out of the centers of excellence and beyond. Truly in some cases, collaborative around. So that's sort of what the examples that I wanted to share with you. Many others. So the way we look at it, as we mature, and as new folks and new entities come into play with us, and the ecosystem expands, the whole concept of putting boundaries around innovation, I think, is passé. So we have to sort of let people work together. People want to work together. We also want to sort of make it. It can't be a science project. It's just got to be how you do things, and you got to enforce it. You got to find ways to peel away a little bit and say, "Hey, that's a great idea. Go sandbox that. Go play with that a little bit." And every day, part of my job is with the IT organization is encouraging the team to come up with ideas that we can just let's run it to the next level. And KK was sitting in the back there, was our chief architect, sort of shepherd that and encourage that in the community, because what we're trying to do is say, okay, go play with this and see what we can do with it. And then if it's real, we'll in fact, the stated goal for my IT leadership organization is to take what we do every day and make it relevant for our customers, external customers. So help them innovate through what we do. And the whole point is nobody's got a monopoly. When you think that somebody's got a monopoly in innovation, then you've lost the plot. So that's sort of how I just put it in context of our centers of excellence. I guess we'll take questions on it. So thank you. Yeah.
So I'd like to now introduce Deborah Magid. Deborah has been with the IBM Software Group. Many of you may know IBM is the second largest software company in the world. And Deborah puts a lot of miles on her frequent flyer card. She spends time in startup ecosystems literally across the globe. And she has a very interesting dual role. She's a part of the IBM Venture Capital Group, and their group largely is to liaise a very, very effective ecosystem among venture capitalists and early stage companies. But she is also the director of strategy for the IBM Software Group, and so she works directly for Steve Mills, EVP. And as many of you know, IBM has really transformed itself into a services and a software company. Deborah has been a key architect of their strategy and a key implementer of bringing a lot of new companies into the IBM fold. A lot of companies right here in Boston are now a part of the IBM family. So Deborah certainly knows the IBM ecosystem very well. She's an instrumental part of the IBM Software Group. It's my pleasure to bring up my good friend Deborah Magid. mic up, okay?
Yeah, because my belief is the live
Yeah.
stream people
Yeah.
can't hear unless
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
mic.
Absolutely.
I've launched it. Oh.
Move the speakers forward a little bit, maybe eliminate some of the reverb, okay?
Yeah,
Just move them off the walls.
Behind the speakers.
Actually, I'm a cognitive psychologist, so I will be watching everybody. I am. Not everyone's started out in tech. So I want to talk about open innovation, but first I want to say a word about venture capital and IBM. I have the best job in the world because I get to meet with venture capitalists and other investors who are passionate about what they put their money into. And then I spend the rest of my time talking to the entrepreneurs they funded who are passionate about what they're building. So my husband loves my job because I come home happy every day. So here we are, in the land of academia. So I moved. You can't see me. I'm standing there. So I'm going to. I can't sit because I can't solve So we're in the land of academia. I thought I would remind you where open innovation principles come from. They actually come from economic theory in the 19th century, but there were some specific people who were very instrumental in codifying these ideas and making them more applied to business and to how governments and corporations operate rather than the economics of societies. And so these two gentlemen, Lundvall and Friedman was at the University of Sussex, Lundvall was in Denmark, and they had this notion that you have these ways of, now they can't see, you can't do that.
You can't cross this line.
You're going to say you can't cross it? Okay, I won't cross that line.
They can either see you or do it.
Okay. So what they were talking about is the fact that if you have ideas and the flow of information and the flow of ideas among not just institutions, but the people in the institutions, that is what creates innovation and that's what creates change. And then you had Professor Seedy and Professor Chesbrough and Berkeley who kind of expanded on these ideas and really talked more certainly about the relationships among different actors in an ecosystem, but also about the fact that your government or your corporation like IBM or your EMC, you can choose your role in the ecosystem and you can behave in ways that enhance that. And if you do it right, then everyone benefits. And so you can do it wrong. I stole that picture from a Tivoli presentation that's talking about system failures, but there are other kinds of failures in the world. So I was my first corporate job in 1989 at AT&T, and they were working on high-def television. And the problem with, when it actually came into being, right? It wasn't in 1989. And the problem was, and Professor Adner wrote an HBR article about this. He was at INSEAD at the time. He wrote an article about this. And what he said is if the actors in the ecosystem don't have common interests and they don't understand the interdependencies among what they do, then you can have the best intent in the world, but the way you actually execute on your strategies will fail because you didn't take these interdependencies into account. And I want to make that point because open innovation is a really prominent idea now, but you can do it right and you can do it. And so in the case of HTTV, he said it was like building a Ferrari, which is a great machine, but there were no roads and there was gasoline and you couldn't actually drive the thing. So I think open source is a great example of a principle of open innovation that was applied very successfully in our industry. Certainly, we've been big believers in open source and principles in which open source is built for a long, long time, but certainly been true of the industry at large. And so that's an example of a case where the people in the ecosystem can make choices that make the system work. way they work, especially if you look at organizations like Apache or Mozilla, they've structured themselves so that the different actors in the ecosystem have specific roles. The roles are understood. I think years ago, people thought of open source as kind of a free-for-all. That was never true, really, and I think people understand it. So this chart on attributes of innovation, I got from Nick D'Onofrio, who was one of my favorite people in my years. He ran our program business research for many, many years. I got this from him more than 10 years ago, but it's still completely true. So innovation can apply to products, it can apply to services, it can apply to business models, which if you're, there's a few startups here, if you're an entrepreneur, you know that that's true. And it can apply to the things we do in society. I do a lot of work with city governments, and it's certainly true that a lot of the innovation now has to do with how cities connect with their citizens. The attributes of innovation are that it must be open. I'll talk about that more, actually, for the entire rest of the talk. It's collaborative, which I think may sound redundant, but isn't entirely redundant. It's multidisciplinary, and that's increasingly true now. If you think about clean tech, renewable energy, if you think about medical devices or healthcare IT, these things are all crossing disciplines, and it's more and more true now, speaking of academia, that schools are understanding that the silos that used to exist between the school and the engineering school and the medical schools are starting to break down. And then, of course, very global. So I work for a company that has, is it 420? Eric's my colleague here. I should have introduced him. I heard. Also in the venture group. 420,000 plus employees make this point for me. And we operate in every country in the world in which it is legal to do so. It's cool. So this is maybe hard for some of you to see, so I'll tell you what's on it. This is the matrix of innovation that's led internally by our product and research teams versus innovation that's led externally by venture capitalists and clients and other kinds of partners, academia and so forth. And on this axis are the very early stage ideas and the things that are more research projects and innovations, and then the things that are more development. So the point of this is to show that the people that we work with, that as a company, and I think all companies should do this, I think even little companies should do this. As a company, we look for innovation wherever we can find it. If we find it in our own labs, that's great. Certainly, collectively in the world, angel investors and venture capitalists and other people spend more money than we do. We spend $5 or $6 billion a year. So we spend a lot, but there's more money spent outside, there's more smart people outside, and so you look for innovation wherever you can find it. Now, the reason we developed this EC group, and the reason we work with venture capitalists and entrepreneurs is, I said I have a really fun job, but there's business reasons for it, of course. And so in the 10 or 12 years since we started, did I lose that microphone?
You're good.
So if you look at the results that we've had over the last 10 or 12 years working with entrepreneurs, we've added more than 1,500 new business partners because of this. We've got more than a third of our acquisitions have come from venture-backed companies and from privately held companies who we met through our VC ecosystem. So these are very practical matters. And when I say ecosystem, this is you're actually working with lots of different people in the community. There's the press, there's the NGOs, there's governments, there's academia, there's the research institutes, and of course our own labs, and of course business partners and others who we work with. And so these ideas come from everywhere. Now, when we look at innovation, we look at both technology and business solutions. And I used to combine all these things on one chart, but it's actually better to separate them and think about how technology is applied to business problems. So, you know, if you look, these are actually areas where I think what we do intersects very well with what entrepreneurs do. So the Internet of Things, which we call Smarter Planet, or mobility, or, you know, you're talking about big data and analytics, of course, including right now, and cloud computing, consumerization of IT. These are all ways of thinking about technology and how technology is used. And then if you apply those things underneath the things that happen with the delivery of energy and smart grids, or healthcare, or how you buy and sell things, either in real stores or on the internet, then these things all come together. And we even split our own business a couple of years ago so that we have the technology side and more the solution side. So that's a way to reflect how we sell and how we build this. So, you know, I think if you believe in open innovation, what you're doing is you're making it a part of your corporate culture. And if it's part of your corporate culture, then it's, you know, it's not a thing that you do, and it's not, I mean, we have centers of excellence as well, and we have an innovation center in Waltham with business partners who come in. But, you know, there are whole sets of things that you do. These are just some examples of them. And if you have a big company and you have a culture of innovation and you encourage people to think in that manner, then lots of people in lots of places come up with ways to do things that become institutionalized and become adopted more broadly. And certainly, I have several examples of social media on here, and I'll probably show you some pictures of these things. But those are the kinds of things that bubble up in a large corporation. You know, your guys start using blogs, and they start using Twitter, and they start using Facebook, and they've got their profiles out there, and they're putting up comments about your corporation, and everybody gets to see it. But the truth is, in the end, it's a good thing, so we encourage it. Open source paradigms I'll mention, because I mentioned open source before. We decided that, you know, for a while, our software business was a little too siloed. So we decided that if we thought about building software the way that open source communities build software, you could get people to collaborate better. So the guys who typically could contribute to something the guys in Webster were doing, even though they were living 1,000 miles apart and working. So a few years ago, one of the general managers set a goal to have 60 new projects run through open source paradigms so that people would contribute to each other's code. And they were checking code that other people would use. It wasn't for their project, it was for someone else's project. As a psychologist, I know that people love to work that way. I'm sure you all know that people love to do this. You barely have to incent them because they love to be seen as experts and they love to contribute to other people. And they love to be doing. So the first year, there were actually triple that number of projects. You barely had to ask people to do it. All you had to do was let them do it, and they would do it. So that's one of the things I think that's been very helpful just on the technology and product side is to have people contribute to each other's work and to be seen as experts and to do that in a very collaborative way and to sort of tear down some of the project boundaries and product silo boundaries. Jams are something that we do on the web where you just get thousands of people. They could be your own employees or they could be clients and business partners together, set up some themes, and they get people just to brainstorm, blog about the different themes. They could put up a one-sentence comment, or they could write a whole page. And a lot of our new innovations came out of that. A couple of years ago, there were about 10 new projects that came up ideas from. We actually run them now for clients. So let's go into some of these other things. So business challenges. So Eric was at Mass Challenge. We just heard about the TiE challenges. That has been globally a fabulous way to get people to innovate. This is an example of open government, open data in France. And the government is making data available and challenging startup companies to use the data and come up with new kinds of apps. In New York City and in Boston, they get prizes for doing this sort of thing, but I put up the French site so you would understand that it's a very global phenomenon. How many of you knew about the Space Apps Challenge? This was my favorite one from this past year. It happened in April. NASA made their data available internationally, so if you're not, you did know about it. They made their data available internationally, and they had teams of entrepreneurs from all over the world, and you can see some of the many projects here, to use data from NASA to create new things. So there are just so many ways that these things can happen. This is an IBM community. We call them communities. They're virtual, they're online. This particular one, you can probably see people is about cloud. But they're on all different topics, and any employee can set one up and invite people to join them, and you can post things to them, and the things you post can be photographs or pitches or PowerPoints or comments or all sorts of things. And so there's a lot of dialogue that goes along. A lot of the I'm on a strategy team. A lot of the strategy teams use these. But right now, I'm on a workforce that's looking at mobile strategy, and we use these communities a lot. We actually use them for our meetings. And of course, blogs. This is me. I had to put up one of my blogs because I'm a speaker, but it became a very common thing, of course, in all corporations. This happens to be on the subject of Smarter Planet. It's a formal, department-led thing, so it's to clients. And then this is IBM Connections, which is a product that was originally developed at Lotus here in Massachusetts, and was a way for collaboration to happen among project teams. It's been actually, we sell this as well as using it ourselves, and it's become extremely popular. DeveloperWorks is a online community of technical people who can post tips and techniques, they can put code, they can tell each other how something works, and that's open to the general public. And we also, of course, use Facebook and LinkedIn and all the other social media. This is a YouTube video. It's the start of a YouTube video called the IBM Centennial. How many people have seen the IBM Centennial video? You should see it. Now I'm trying not to be biased. This is the most fun, tell me if this is true, the most fun corporate video I have ever seen in my entire life. And there's a trick to it, and I will not tell you what that is, because you should watch the video and see for yourself. It's 15 minutes long. You don't have to watch the whole thing, but it'll go by like that, I promise you. So just go to Facebook and type in IBM Centennial, this will come right up. And then we have open innovation everywhere. So we have these business plan competitions called Smart Camp. We had one in Boston in the summer. This one was in Istanbul. This is Shah Akel, like my colleague, who's sort of Eric and my counterpart in Istanbul, and there she is on social media promoting Turkish entrepreneurs. So it's everywhere, it's global, it needs to be part of the culture, and there are a lot of different practices and tips and tricks and techniques you can use to actually put it into practice, because it's, it used to be the I word, innovation, everybody says it, but you can actually make it a very practical thing, and I think everyone should.
We have a rare opportunity to ask Deborah some questions. Are there a few questions that you'd like to direct to Deborah before we transition?
Here's a question.
I've never, you got so many amazing things going on here. I comment with the, I go to my head up, when you go to the call, how do you get people to engage?
Yeah. So, some things you don't have to. I mean, like that open source thing I mentioned, people just did it way more than we thought they would because they wanted to. Blogging, putting stuff on Facebook, people just want to do things like that. Some of the jams, I think, where it's more formalized and more structured, and you have to encourage people to come up with new ideas. We're going to try to incubate some new stuff. Try to help us think what's the next new thing. You have to encourage people to do that, and that's usually done. It's usually done somewhat top down, but I just participated in one a couple of months ago, and I thought they did something smart. They had subject matter experts who were from different organizations, so they would be people you knew and trusted. There wasn't just some random guy you never heard of. Who would act and sort of moderate some of the discussion threads and kind of keep an eye on them and put little comments in and encourage people to say what they really thought. If something interesting started to bubble up, encourage that. Talk more about it. And so I think that helps. So having something that's participatory in a thoughtful way and not just random, I think would help. Yes?
Right. Amazing problem.
Thank you.
We get a lot of good information. For a startup company that is really, that has a disruptive innovation or is trying to bring that innovative product to market, how do you guys collaborate or how do you bring them as part of your competitive landscape?
Yeah, so I often give talks that are not about innovation. So I often give talks on specific subjects like big data or smart plants, smart cities. And so then people come up to me afterwards who are doing things in those areas. And so I meet startups that way sometimes, or I meet them through their VCs. So tomorrow I'm going to see a number of VCs in Boston with Eric and with my boss. And the VCs will tell us about companies they funded. And it won't be random because I explain what our strategy is, and so they suggest entrepreneurs to me who they think could be a good strategic fit. Then Eric or I will meet them and screen if it looks like a really good opportunity. If it does, I know people in every product group that we have, and we make the connections. And you can't always predict if something will really click, but it often does, and that's how we get. I'll say one more thing about it. There has to be good energy on both sides to make it work, and usually the thing that makes it work is a proof of concept where we can go to a customer together and try it.
Very quick follow-up, okay, and I want to also ask you to direct questions at Sanjay as well. But do you have a follow-up quickly or not?
No, I know that.
Okay. Okay, yeah, please.
One of the questions that I have in terms of capturing innovation is how do you prevent duplication? And how do you capture the corporate narrative?
We don't prevent duplication. We're really terrible about it. I know you can tell me if you're able to keep hands on that. I mean, we have probably funded projects in our research labs that somebody in Alberta is doing the same things in Washington. I'm sure that's happened. Research, though, is more structured, believe it or not, than the product groups. Because there are 9 research labs, but there are hundreds and hundreds of product groups. And one of the ways that you prevent duplication is we've started to have there's small teams, but certain individual people talk to each other every week about what's going on so they can act as representatives of the group. It's a place where I really pay attention to this myself because I work a lot with them. We have an information management business which owns big data. They also own D2 and all that stuff. And we have a business analytics group which owns Cognos and SPSS. If I found a startup in Montreal that was working in big data, would I introduce them to the SPSS Cognos guys and analytics, or would I introduce them to the management guys? Those people have to work very closely together, otherwise it would just get chaotic.
I mean, I'd say a little, the research piece is absolutely true. So if you want to direct your research dollars where you want to be laser focused on that. But when you're doing kind of development activities, you're thrashing around ideas and a little healthy duplication is out there. Because it's different. There's more than one way to solve a problem. And so, not a large volume, but sometimes a little duplication is okay as long as there's someone else supervision.
It's okay at the start of projects. It's not okay when it goes to clients because they use customers. But it gets weak now.
There's also a temporal aspect to that.
Sure.
That you do something at one time, and then the corporation evolves, and then the institution, new people come in and do the same thing over again, having forgotten that this was already tried before.
That can happen more likely with processes than with other things. With technology, it's less likely to happen because you can see how fast our industry moves. So the things that happened in the software industry 5 years ago are different than the things that are happening now.
And in our case, the chief technology officer's office sort of puts over a lot of those what's going on. So it brings in all the architects. So there's
yeah, we have architectural boards.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So there's a structure to making sure that there's maybe at some level the sharing going on.
So is there a process for?
Kendra, please.
It's fantastic, all this crowdsourcing and getting ideas from it. The question I have is, how do you manage the large volume of ideas coming through? How do you prioritize them? And usually, then after that, where do you get the resources to actually make them real?
I'll take that. So we use the innovation conference on an annual basis to do sort of the filtering. That's a good forcing function to get peer review. We have a board of our distinguished engineers, fellows, and others that review the ideas and select. And what we've done over the years is evolve this new process where we have different business units or groups within the company put aside a little seed capital, if you would, to pick an idea that's either in the space that they sponsor or in the space that they like, or you can bring the spaces together. And I put aside a little money, as an example, to say, we're going to pick an idea here and go off and take it to a logical level and evaluate. So we've evolved from where it was, nice to have to let's pick the top 10 and give it some light, 4 or 5 and give it some light. So.
Yeah, it works the same way that it would work in an incubator or an accelerator or a business plan package. It's a funnel. And so you get lots of things going into the funnel and a few things coming out, and there are different ways to manage the funnel. So that jam I mentioned is one way to create and manage a funnel. Another way to do it is a process I didn't even talk about, it was only like 20 minutes, called the GTO, the Global Technology Outlook. This is a sourcing within the company of ideas from all over. It starts with research, but the venture capital group contributes, the product groups contribute. It is meant to be the ideas that will show where our industry will be in 5 or 10 years, most of 10 years. And literally hundreds of ideas come into that, and there is a group of people from corporate strategy and research who review the ideas and come up with the 5 or 10 or 20 that will be.
And Stephen, we'll talk about this on the panel, a little bit about the analytics and systems that you've built internally to drive some of that prioritization. Frank, next question.
Yeah, the question for both of you. Which actually you can answer. Do you believe you're innovating faster? First. And second question, who's your role model in terms of looking at other large companies that have similar scale? What are your role models?
I'll go first. I do not believe we are innovating fast enough. I don't think large corporations can do it fast enough. That's the reason we have a venture capital group and have a lot of startups as business partners, because they can, and therefore we get to be more in front of the market than we would be if we just tried to do this by ourselves, because we can't. Too big to do that. We put in new processes and we try to be very aware, we try to do as rules we can, but you can only do so much. I forgot the second part of the question.
Role models.
Oh, role models. One of my role models is Apple. And it's for several reasons. I used to be a designer, so I said I started as a psychologist, so I was a product designer myself. I really believe in the value of good design and that it should be built into your processes and part of how you build things so that the customer experience from the very start through how you buy, how you sell, how supported is all very seamless. So I really like that whole total product design, integrated design. Integrated design is a concept, by the way, that's very popular now. It came from architecture originally, but I think tech companies.
Everything she said. Fabulous response. I think any company that thinks they're innovating fast enough, really, you've written your role.
They're living in the closet and haven't been on the internet today.
So, both our companies acquire a lot of companies,
That's right.
Work with a lot of companies, invest in companies. I think that entire ecosystem fuels innovation. Believe it or not, companies that we learn from are companies we acquire sometimes. And their life cycles are so much more shorter, so much more, they do more with less. Just every one of them that you pick, you go something you can learn from that.
Was there one real insight, Sanjay, of a company that you acquired that really stands out for you?
I mean, a lot of the companies you acquire, without taking any nation, Green Plum, a recent company we did, Big Data, Iceland, Maine, RSA, just different spaces that different ways of building IP and value and I'm not eliminating any, but I'm saying these are examples of companies that take them apart and say, wow, that's great. And sometimes it's not even the technology, it's the go-to-market process and the way they measure customer satisfaction or whatever.
For us, it was like, for me anyway, I think one of the real insights was from SPSS, because that taught us that you could do business differently than you would do before you have this kind of tools. You can make predictions. You can make predictions before that were accurate, and I can do it.
That helped inform the strategy and ultimately became a very important team.
Right.
Yeah, great. We'll take one more question just so we can try to get back on track. Last question. Anybody? Over here, yeah, please.
My question is pretty simple. Have you put in place a reward system just to make sure people are collaborating in the right direction, such a thing?
We have layers of reward systems. So
Yeah, just restate the question if you would.
Oh, yes, Francis is asking if we have reward systems to help people save in that, right? Like, so I was going to say, we have layers of reward systems. I mean, I can give a day off or, you know, a ticket for, you know, for cash for a meal to my assistant because she did something creative and went, you know, on the boundary of her job. And we give prizes to people who file a lot of patents. And it's a lot of it is at the discretion of individual managers, or we had a scheme for a while where you could give it to a peer. I have a lot of IBM flows because of that. So there are lots of different things you can do for people.
Yeah, similar thing. But I guess the most prestigious for us, and it's not even the monetary thing, is really the presence. And that's just just the ultimate. You know, you get the credibility, you get the recognition for, you know, those are big, broad ideas.
I want to add one thing, because I started out by saying something about innovation being societal, and then I never mentioned it again, which is just shame on me. So one of the things we started doing about 3 years ago was called corporate service support. And you have to be an executive to go. I think you have to be executive at my level. So you have to be an executive, but not too lofty. And the corporation identifies projects that could be bounded as 3-week projects in different places around the world to do something for a society that needs help. And so we have a colleague named Wendy who went to Kenya recently and was in Nairobi doing a project there. And we've done projects in Rio and in Victoria and you know, all over Africa, India, Latin America, and anything from developing education systems to helping people in, you know, in the Nubian nation and in Egypt figure out how the ladies can sell their goods. It could be anything. And that is a wonderful thing, and I think that's incredibly important.
Well, I want to just thank both Sanjay and Deborah for